Today we're going to be dissecting an eye. The eyes that we're using are actually sheep eyeballs that are prepared, that are purchased from a biological company. And some of these eyes actually have a lot of the musculature around them, so they're going to be taking a little bit more effort to do that. So please join in and get your eyeballs ready to go. First of all, at your kit or at your table, you should have a pair of safety goggles for every person in your group. And everyone needs to wear those or be wearing glasses. You should have a scalpel with a blade on it. These are extremely sharp, and you're going to have one for every 2 students, so be careful and decide who's going to be the cutter for this stuff. You're going to have a pair of scissors, dissecting scissors. They are sharp. Again, you want to make sure that you're careful with those. You should have a probe. The probe has 2 ends on it. It has a pointed straight end, and it also has a curved end. In addition to that, you should have a series of pins, and you should try to have at least one of each one of the colors on your dissecting platform to work with, so that you can keep these, you can mark items as you look at them and identify different parts and be able to point that out to your instructor as you go. Something to consider here, these eyeballs, although they've been preserved, they can have a lot of fluids and stuff in them. You want to make sure that you're very careful with them. And the other thing is that you need to realize that these animals were not sacrificed for you to dissect their eyes, but just like a physician or anyone else who works in healthcare who's working with people or animals, you need to be respectful. So these are not something that you're going to be playing with as we go through this. This is for the purposes of education. So one more item that every one of you should have at your dissecting table is a pair of gloves per student. They do come in different sizes, and make sure you ask for the size that's going to be best for you. The other thing you should have is this pair of tweezers. Now, the eyeballs that we're using today actually have a lot of the musculature, and sometimes they even have some of the exterior skin on them. So it's going to take a little bit more time to dissect than if you were just working with just an eyeball. So this is all of the musculature. So if you look at it really closely, so kind of examine your eyeball. Okay, so on the outside of this eye, there's a lot of fat. And if you think about your own eye, your eye sits in an orbital. And in that orbital, you have body fat that surrounds the eye that protects it from the bony structure of the eye's orbital, the bone structure. And so what we see on the outside here is a lot of fatty tissue. And so before we can even get to the eyeball, one of the first things we're going to have to do is remove this. And so to do that, you need to take your scalpel, and you're just going to carefully cut down through the tissue and try not to cut into the eyeball. And so as I get down into the tissue, and this is where your partner can help you with that, you're going to see that this is fatty. And so we're going to be removing fatty tissue to start with. So I'm going to try to get as much of this off as possible before we start. So you can see it's pretty tough, but I want to make sure I don't cut into the eye. I'm just cutting off this tissue. Use your tweezers to kind of give it a pull. Pull it off in chunks. All of this needs to go into a garbage can, plastic bag that's basically set aside for putting the bio waste into it. So again, I'm going to cut a little further. Being careful not to get a hold of the eye itself. Like I said, you need to pull, and you can kind of see right here where this is like, you think about around your eye, you've got tissues that you can pull back your eyelids and look at. That's what this tissue is, and we want to remove all of that. And you need to be careful. Try to keep the eye on the surface as much as possible when you're working and not in your hand, because you don't want to cut your hand accidentally with the scalpel, because it is sharp. It's sharper than any knife your mom's got in the kitchen or your dad's got in the kitchen, or you have in the kitchen. Okay, so you can see this tissue is coming off pretty easily once I get it going.
Okay. You are now.
Okay, so if you look at this real closely, what you can see is you can actually see the end of one of the muscles, and this muscle actually helps move the eye from side to side or up and down. So think about it when you roll your eyes. These are those muscles that you're using. Here's another one right here that you can actually see where it teases out into the end, where it actually has an attachment. So you've got the insertion is right here on the edge of the eyeball, and the attachment is going to be someplace back here around the orbital. So again, I'm going to keep on going so that I'm removing this exterior tissue. And I'm going to cut this muscle off. You can cut your muscles off as you go too, so that you end up with just the eyeball. And you don't have to keep it all in one place. It's not like trying to peel an orange in one piece. If you want to, you can just cut it off and leave that piece sitting off to the side, which is what I'm going to do right here. But you can see I'm trying really hard not to hold this eye in my hand because we don't want to make it so our fingers get in the way. Now I'm cutting through yet another muscle here around the eye. Okay, one of the other things you're going to find at the back of the eye back here, once you get all of this peeled off, is you're going to find the exit of the optic nerve. So you want to kind of be careful and try not to remove your optic nerve from the back of your eyeball. So just keep going until you've gotten all this excess stuff off the eyeball. But that tells you how much protection you have. If you've ever seen somebody who's been undernourished, you'll notice that their eyes kind of seem like they bulge out from their heads, and it's because they don't have the body fat, or they're sunk in, I should say too. They don't have body fat around them that's going to keep them safe. Okay, and again, I'm going to remove a large chunk of this fat from around my eye. Set that off to the side. And continue with removing. Okay, so now you can kind of see the back of this, and you can see more of the musculature. All of this pink on the back here is actually muscle. Okay, so I keep on going around. Okay. And once you've got most of it off, you're going to find that what you have is a much smaller structure. And this is just about the size of your eye, maybe a little bit smaller, but a sheep's eye is pretty darn close to the same size as a human eye. So now I've got the last little bit here that I'm removing. Okay, so how you doing? Got yours off? Okay, so now this is my eyeball, and you can kind of see the front portion of it. If you look at your page 2 in your dissection, you can see that it shows you the cornea portion, which is on here on the outside. You can see the white portion, which is going to be the sclera of this animal's eye right here. Okay. And inside of that, you can find the aqueous humor. And so that's one of the reasons that it's kind of mushy a little bit there. Okay, so now that we've got all of our exterior extra tissue off, this again should go into a plastic bag. Shouldn't be left lying about. So turn to page 2 in your dissection and you'll see that. You'll see the diagram of everything. So you can kind of start looking at it. Its pupil is pretty dark, so it's kind of hard to see it. If you press in lightly on the sides of the eye, you can kind of get it to bulge out so you can see it a little bit better. But you obviously can't really see the iris and those sorts of things very well. But you can definitely tell that there's a liquid in there. And my particular eyeball is a little bit saggy. It's got some fluid loss in there, but you can definitely see it. You can see parts of the iris, but you can't really tell that it's truly the iris. But you can definitely see sclera all the way around it. Okay, does everybody see their sclera? Okay, so I'm going to put the yellow pin into the sclera of the eye. Now I'm not poking very far in because I don't want to damage it in any way, but it's just this white tissue right here. So if I could get it to stick, it would be right in there. I don't want to stick it really because I don't want it to stick into the eyeball. Okay, so now what I want you to do is turn to page 3. And in page 3 it says to examine the outside of your eyeball. And you can see the sclera, which I said was that tough outside portion. And then you can see the covering on the front here, which we already talked about, which is the cornea. right here. And you can see the pupil, but it's kind of hard to see. The pupil is that darkened area. We've already cut away all the fat and muscle, and now we're ready to actually take the scalpel and incise through our cornea so that we can actually look inside here. So take your scalpel and gently make a slice right down the center of it. Try to cover it back into the same area so that you don't end up, okay, now it's going to start coming out, and this is the part where you want a paper towel. It's kind of a little bit thicker than water, but it's definitely a watery-like substance in there. Okay, and so I'm going to slice a little bit more so I can get it to come out. Okay, so you can just see that it kind of runs out. You probably want to get a paper towel or two, everybody. Ours, for some reason, does not have a clear liquid. Our liquid is actually kind of tainted with a brown fluid, which is no doubt something that's gotten in there. Now it's coming out. So kind of oozes out a little bit at a time. And you can kind of stick your scalpel underneath the edge of it, and you can see how thick that cornea is. It's nice and thick. And obviously, because these are prepared, that's not particularly as clear, but for on your eye, this is a completely clear surface, which makes it so that it's something you can see through, and it actually helps bend light to get it into your eye. Okay, now what we're going to do, after we've done that, we've just kind of basically released some of the fluids from the eye. Don't have to cut too much further. Turn the eye on its side, and what we're going to do now is we're going to actually cut it in half. So my iris and cornea are on one side. I'm going to actually take my knife and I'm going to slice the eye in half. Now you need to do this carefully because it is, the scalpel again is very sharp. You may decide to use a scissor. It doesn't have to be perfectly cut in half, but you want to cut it in half. And once you've done that, you're going to reveal an interior chamber. Okay, and this is the posterior chamber of the eye. And when you look inside there, now you're going to be able to see the lens. It's right here. And then you're going to see this pouch of fluid, and this is just quite beautiful. This is one of the things that's pretty interesting about eyeballs, is that this particular substance is more like a jelly. So it's a much thicker fluid than what you find in the front part of the eye. So remember how that oozed out and it was just kind of a liquid? This is more like a jellyish type stuff, you know, kind of gelatinous. I'm not going to call it a food, but you know, it's pretty thick in comparison, but again, completely clear. And this is going to be one of the things that helps the eye, again, transfer light to the back of the eye in the back portion. Okay, so with it open now, you can actually take out the lens. So you can remove the lens. So our lens is right here. And when you do this, it's actually attached to the iris. So that's the colored part of the eye. And it's going to kind of tear your iris up as you do this. So just kind of be aware of that. And on the edge of it, you may find a little bit of tissue on the side of it. I'm going to use my tweezers to pick it up, take it out of there. Okay, when I do that, you can see that I'm pulling out some of the gelatinous solution that's inside the eye. Now you could clean this up, and if this were a fresh eye, this lens would be completely clear. Okay, so I'm going to move mine out onto the dissecting board so you can take a look at it. If it were clear, you could take this and set it on a piece of paper and actually magnify letters on like a piece of newspaper. Okay, so now I'm pulled out the rest of the gelatinous stuff from the back part of the eye that was in the front portion of the chamber. Let me get my paper out of the way here. It's not going to work. We're going to just wrap everything up in this. Get rid of it. Okay, so now what I have in the front of the eye, so I have the iris, and the iris in an acting eye or working eye actually can contract or expand depending on the amount of light, and it actually changes the amount of light that goes into an eye. So you can remove that. I'm going to take off my back portion the rest of the way. I'm going to use my scissors for one more. You got it. Very good. Okay, so now the two are separated. So this is the front of the eye. Okay, and you can see the iris in there now pretty well. Okay, and then from the inside, you can see how dark it is in there. So it's very dark. And now let's look at the back half of the eye. And again, we've got all that fluid in there. Now I'm going to take my fluid out and try really hard not to disturb much of the back of the eye. And we've done it. And you can see this is the tissue holds that liquid jelly in, or that gelatinous solution in, and prevents the eye from collapsing on itself. So basically helps keep its surface. Okay, so again, looking at the front of your eye, you can see the iris. We've removed our lens. We've got our lens lying here. The iris, again, is what's going to contract using some little tiny muscles in there that actually make it so that it gets larger when it's dark outside and it gets smaller when it's light outside. So it's actually like the aperture on a camera. It changes, I think it's called the aperture on a camera. Okay, we've got our vitreous humor out. That was the liquid in the back portion of it. And we've taken out our lens, and you can actually hold it up and look through it if you like. Be careful, and you can also put it onto a piece of paper and see how it magnifies and changes the shapes of things. So you've got your eyeball emptied out, and now what you're going to do is you're going to actually be able to look through the retina if you want to, or through the iris if you want to, so you can hold it up and actually take a look through that. And you can see out. It's pretty foggy, so you can't really see very well through it, but you could actually see my glove through there as I move my glove around. Okay, on the back of the eye, notice that I still have a stalk on here. And in this stalk is actually the optical nerve. Now ours are in pretty tough shape. They've been severed pretty well, so it's hard to get in there. If we cut off some more muscle back here, so I'm going to turn it upside down and try to take off a little bit more muscle. And as I do that, we're going to be able to reveal pretty quickly here is this little tiny stalk right there. So there's this little tiny stalk. That stalk is the optic nerve. That's what takes all of the information from the eye to the back of the brain. So those are the optic nerves. So there's one optic nerve that leaves each one of the eyes. If you go to the inside, you can see the spot where it comes in, goes out of the eye, right in here. Okay? All right, so let's take a break.